Have you ever stopped to think about what happened to the apostles of Jesus after he ascended to heaven? Those men who walked alongside the Master and witnessed his miracles faced a life full of challenges and dangers. Persecuted, mistreated, and brutally killed, the disciples of Jesus certainly did not have an easy life. But how did each one of them die? What was the price they paid for following the gospel? In this video, you will discover the remarkable and impactful stories of how the 12 disciples of Jesus met their deaths, along with the accounts of Paul and Matthias, the apostles who came afterward. Get ready to learn the details of the tragic end of the 12 apostles of Jesus in the Bible. Before we talk about the death of each of the disciples and apostles of Jesus, it is important to understand that with the exception of 2 of them, the Bible does not provide details about how the others died. The information we have comes from ancient Christian traditions. Some of these traditions were recorded in texts that emerged shortly after the apostolic period. There are traditions that are well documented and appear in the works of ancient historians and the Church Fathers, but others are less reliable and seem more like legends that emerged in the early centuries of Christianity. In any case, it is important to remember that, as interesting as ancient traditions may be, they do not carry the same weight as the biblical text. These Christian traditions can be useful in giving us an idea of what happened in the early years of the Church and in helping us understand the historical context, but they are not the Bible. Additionally, discussing the death of Jesus' apostles is not simple, as there are many different and sometimes confusing versions of what happened to each one. Some accounts mix facts and characters, making it difficult to know what truly happened. Here, I will try to present the most accepted and reliable information within the study of historical theology, so we can better understand what is believed about the death of the apostles. Let us start our list with James, son of Zebedee, also known as one of the sons of thunder, alongside his brother John. He was one of Jesus' closest disciples, present at important moments, such as the Transfiguration and in the Garden of Gethsemane. James, along with Peter and John, was part of the Lord's innermost circle, and therefore witnessed various miracles and teachings directly from Jesus. Among all the apostles, the death of James is the only one, besides that of Judas Iscariot, that is recorded in the New Testament, specifically in chapter 12 of the book of Acts of the Apostles. Therefore, it is the most reliable account of the death of an apostle, as it comes directly from the Scriptures, while the other records rely on later traditions. James, son of Zebedee, was the first of the apostles to be martyred for his faith in Jesus. His death occurred around the year 44 after Christ, during the persecution of the early Christians promoted by King Herod Agrippa I, one of the rulers of the Herodian dynasty, who was the grandson of Herod the Great. This same Herod Agrippa I was also the nephew of Herod Antipas, the ruler who ordered the beheading of John the Baptist. Herod Agrippa I, who ruled in Judea, wanted to please the Jewish religious leaders and consolidate his political power, so he began targeting the leaders of the young Christian community. He ordered James to be arrested and killed with a sword, an execution that likely involved beheading, a common practice of the time for those considered threats to power or public order. The fact that James was executed in this manner reflects the fear that political and religious leaders had concerning the growth of Christianity. By ordering James's death, Herod sought not only to eliminate an important figure among the Christians, but also to send a message of intimidation to other followers of Jesus. He did not stop there. Shortly afterward, he also imprisoned the apostle Peter, planning to kill him to continue pleasing the religious leaders of the time. However, while James was martyred, Peter was miraculously freed from prison by an angel, as recorded in the same chapter of Acts, showing that, despite the persecution, God continued to protect and guide his servants. James, therefore, entered history as the first martyr among the apostles, someone who paid with his own life for his faithfulness to Christ. His death marked a significant moment for the early church, which, despite the persecution, continued to grow and spread, strengthened by the testimony and sacrifice of its leaders. According to some ancient Christian traditions, the Apostle Andrew, who was Peter's brother and one of the first disciples called by Jesus, was martyred in Greece, in the Roman province of Achaia, specifically in the city of Patras. Andrew dedicated his life to preaching the gospel in various regions after Jesus' ascension, and in Patras he is said to have converted many people, including the wife of the local proconsul, which caused great discontent among the Roman authorities. The proconsul, furious at Andrew's influence over his wife and fearing that Christianity would spread even further, ordered his arrest and condemnation. Andrew was sentenced to die by crucifixion, but instead of being crucified on a traditional cross like Jesus, he asked to be crucified on an X-shaped cross, believing he was not worthy to die in the same manner as his master. This gesture demonstrates Andrew's profound humility and reverence for Jesus, his commitment to faith, and his willingness to suffer for it. Before being crucified, Andrew went through a long and painful session of torture, during which he was brutally scourged, as was customary among the Roman authorities, to intimidate and punish Christians. He was tied to the cross, rather than nailed, to prolong his suffering, and remained there for 2 days, preaching to passers-by and encouraging Christians to stand firm in their faith, even amidst persecutions. Because of this tradition, the X-shaped cross became known as the St. Andrew's Cross and became a symbol of humility, faith, and courage in the face of martyrdom. Andrew's story serves as a reminder of the sacrifice and dedication of the early apostles, who gave their lives to spread the message of Jesus throughout the world. The accounts of the death of the Apostle Philip are very confusing, especially because these accounts seem to mix up the Apostle Philip with Philip the Evangelist, who was a deacon of the church in Jerusalem. Some traditions say he died by crucifixion, others say he was stoned, still others say he was both stoned and crucified, and some even say he was hanged. There is also a tradition that says he died of natural causes. Despite the many versions, the most widely known and accepted tradition about Philip's death is the one that describes his ministry in Asia Minor, particularly in the region of Phrygia, an area historically associated with the apostles' preaching of the gospel. It is said that Philip was very active in evangelizing this region, facing severe opposition from local authorities and the population who still practiced pagan religions. According to this tradition, during one of his missions in Phrygia, Philip was arrested because of his preaching. He was accused of disturbing public order and challenging the local gods, something considered a serious crime at that time. After being imprisoned, he was reportedly sentenced to death. The accounts differ between him being crucified or stoned, but the most popular version is that he was crucified and at the same time stoned by those who rejected his message. The Apostle Bartholomew, also called Nathanael, is one of Jesus' most mysterious apostles, as there are practically no reliable sources about his life after Jesus' earthly ministry. However, some traditions say that, after dedicating his life to preaching the gospel in various regions, he was flayed alive. Other traditions say that in addition to being flayed, Bartholomew was also crucified. Still, others say he was scourged to death or beheaded. Despite the different versions and the lack of reliable sources to confirm the exact manner of his death, what is clear is that Bartholomew suffered a violent martyrdom for his faith. He is remembered in Christian tradition as a faithful apostle who spared no effort to spread the message of Jesus in distant lands and, like many other apostles, courageously faced the consequences of his commitment to the gospel. This dedication and willingness to die for what he believed in made Bartholomew an example of devotion and sacrifice, inspiring generations of Christians to follow his example, even in the face of persecution and adversity. The Apostle Thomas, also known as Thomas the Twin or Thomas the Doubter, is an intriguing figure among the 12 apostles of Jesus. Although his name is directly linked to the episode in which he doubted Christ's resurrection until he saw the nail marks, Thomas, after Jesus' ascension, played a fundamental role in the spread of Christianity. The information about his fate, however, is based on ancient traditions and legends that arose over the centuries. There are many speculations about the end of the Apostle Thomas's life based on legends and ancient traditions. Some of these traditions say that Thomas was a missionary in the regions of Syria and India, and that his death occurred in southern India, allegedly being pierced by spears wielded by followers of local religions. According to some Christian traditions, Simon the Zealot was martyred when he was already of advanced age during the reign of Emperor Trajan. This period was marked by persecutions of Christians in various parts of the Roman Empire, as the authorities viewed the growth of Christianity as a threat to Roman order and religious traditions. One of the most well-known versions of his death is that Simon was crucified, possibly in Persia or somewhere in the Middle East where he was preaching at the time. This method of execution, common in the Roman Empire, was often used to intimidate followers of Christ. Accounts indicate that, like other apostles, he accepted his fate with courage, seeing martyrdom as a way of following in the footsteps of his master Jesus. Another version, which is even more dramatic, suggests that Simon was burned alive. In this account, he was captured by authorities or by religious opponents and sentenced to die by fire due to his continuous and influential preaching. It is believed that even in the face of flames, he remained steadfast in his faith, bearing witness to the love of Christ and encouraging other Christians to stay strong amidst persecution. There is yet another tradition that describes his death in a brutal manner. He was allegedly sawn in half. This method of execution was especially cruel, and some accounts suggest that Simon suffered this fate at the hands of pagan religious leaders who fiercely opposed his message. According to this tradition, the saw was used to emphasize the brutality with which he was treated, highlighting the resilience and determination of the apostle not to renounce his faith, even in the face of such a horrific death. According to some traditions, Jude, also called Thaddeus, was a great missionary who evangelized various regions of the Roman Empire until he was martyred. And of course, there are also different versions of his death, which state that he was killed by spear blows, by club blows, or that his head was cut off with axe blows. An interesting fact is that, in some ancient accounts, the deaths of Jude, also called Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot are connected, claiming that both apostles were beaten to death with axe blows by a crowd led by pagan priests in Mesopotamia. Matthew, before following Jesus, was a tax collector. There are various stories about how he died. Some say he was martyred, while others claim he died of natural causes. However, the most popular version is that Matthew was killed in Ethiopia, probably struck by a sword while he was preaching. As for James, son of Alphaeus, also known as James the Less, there is much confusion about his death. Some traditions end up confusing this James with the one who wrote one of the New Testament epistles. But when we differentiate James, son of Alphaeus, from other biblical figures with the same name, we find ancient accounts saying that he preached the gospel in parts of Egypt and was eventually crucified there because of his faith and preaching work. Jesus predicted the death of the Apostle Peter when he said, "When you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you're old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." With these words, Jesus was indicating the type of death that Peter would face to glorify God. Then Jesus called him, saying, "Follow me." Among the accounts of the apostles' deaths, the most well-known are those that speak of Peter's martyrdom. The writings of the early church leaders state that Peter was killed in Rome around the year 68 after Christ, during the persecution of Christians promoted by Emperor Nero. According to these traditions, Peter was executed at a place called Nero's Circus. He was condemned to crucifixion, but not considering himself worthy to die in the same manner as Jesus, he asked to be crucified upside down. John was the last of Jesus' apostles to pass away. According to traditions, he endured much persecution and even torture. There is an ancient account that says he was thrown into a cauldron of boiling oil, but miraculously survived. After this episode, he was exiled to the island of Patmos, where he received the revelations that he wrote in the book of Revelation. When Emperor Domitian died, John was released and returned to Ephesus, where he lived until he died of natural causes at a very old age. Judas Iscariot was the first of the 12 disciples to die, but unlike the others, he did not die because of his faith in Jesus. Judas was responsible for betraying Jesus, handing him over to the religious leaders for 30 pieces of silver. After realizing what he had done, he tried to return the money to the priests, but they refused. According to Matthew, after this, Judas went out and hanged himself. Luke, in the book of Acts of the Apostles, records how disastrous and terrible the death of the traitor disciple was, stating that he burst open in the middle, causing his intestines to spill out. It seems that Judas Iscariot's body remained hanging at the place of hanging until, over time, it split open. Now let's talk about Matthias, the apostle who was chosen to replace Judas Iscariot. Some traditions say he became a missionary in Ethiopia and later went to the Caucasus region, where he was supposedly crucified. Other stories claim that he was killed in Judea, being beheaded by the Jews. There are also versions that say he lived to an old age and died of natural causes in Jerusalem. Lastly, we have Paul, the apostle who, although not part of the original 12, was chosen by the resurrected Jesus to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. The traditions about his death are considered reliable, as are those about Peter. According to records, Paul was beheaded in Rome during the reign of Emperor Nero, around the year 67 after Christ, in the same persecution that led Peter to martyrdom. In his second letter to Timothy, Paul describes his final moments before being executed. In light of all these accounts, the most important aspect when looking at these stories is not just knowing how Jesus' apostles died, but recognizing that they dedicated their entire lives to the gospel. They were true followers of Christ, and Jesus often spoke about the cost of being his disciple. These men were willing to pay that price, giving up their comfort and even their lives. They did not seek fame or recognition for themselves, but rather that the name of Jesus Christ would be known in all parts of the world. The gospel has reached us today because God chose, prepared, and sent these men who placed Christ's mission above their own lives. Now write in the comments if you already knew how Jesus' apostles died. Share this teaching with more people and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. May God bless you.